Support for this episode comes from Modern Football Technology. Modern Football Technology provides real-time opponent tendencies and self-scout while eliminating manual data entry into Huddle, DV Sport, and Exos. If you're tired of tools that are time-consuming to learn and perform inconsistently at best, then we recommend Modern Football for a fresh perspective. Schedule a demo today at teammofo.com to see a battle-tested tool that's proven to perform and deliver value. Mention Coach and Coordinator Podcast or use the coupon code CC10 to receive 10% off your first year. And listen to our recent episode featuring Folsom High School defensive coordinator Jordan Ersick to learn more about how the 2023 California State Champion uses modern football to dominate their opponents.
Throughout the course of the year, like the championship teams are not necessarily always won in football by the best teams. They're won by the healthiest teams and the teams that continue to get better throughout the year.
It's October, and as the season progresses, success is not solely determined by the talent or skill of a team. Championship teams are often those that maintain their health throughout the season and continuously improve their performance. As coaches, we play a critical role in ensuring that our players remain in optimal condition, and strategic practice management becomes paramount. Today, three coaches delve into the importance of balancing practice intensity and recovery, cutting practice time, and utilizing technology to monitor player workload. We are joined by Army co-offensive coordinator and offensive line coach Matt Drinkall, two-time D2 national champion and new Towson head coach Pete Shinnick, and five-time state champion head coach of Union High School in Oklahoma, Kirk Fridrich, to discuss their approaches to staying sharp in the late season.
What you see on tape is a direct reflection of what you teach and how you teach. Video is important, but if you don't teach well, you're not going to like what you see on your video. First Down Playbook has been helping coaches teach better for 13 years. It allows you to present installs, playbooks, and practice cards in half the time with NFL quality. Coaching tools like video pairing, a player app, practice schedules, and wristband sheets have made First Down Playbook a program management system with everything in one place. If you're in a position of leadership with your football program, receive a free 1-week look at First Down Playbook. Call them at 512-814-6158 or visit them on their website or social media. Mention Coach and Coordinator Podcast or use the coupon code COACH24 to receive a $100 discount off the normal $700 First Down Playbook team membership price. Links and the phone number are in the show notes. As coaches, we know that some of the biggest hurdles to our team's success can come from off the field. Your team needs support to tackle the endless list of expenses, uniforms, training equipment, travel, and more. But raising that money can feel like a full-time job. Thankfully, there's Vertical Raise. Vertical Raise is the premier online fundraising platform using innovative technology to create the easiest and most efficient system available. Raise more money in less time with a local fundraising coach who works with your team every step of the way to customize the ideal fundraiser. With options for online donations, digital discount cards, premium product sales, and even spirit shops, Vertical Raise has top-of-the-line solutions for every fundraising style. To find out more, visit verticalraise.com and we'll get you connected with an exclusive offer on your first fundraiser.
First up is Army co-offensive coordinator Matt Drinkall. He emphasizes the importance of maintaining the health and improvement of a team throughout the year rather than solely relying on talent. He prefers to consistently shorten practice schedules and minimal changes in game plans to ensure players are rested and able to perform at their best. He shares an example of a player with a high number of carries who remained healthy due to their practice approach.
Yeah, so one of the biggest things I feel like I've always tried to take into consideration is throughout the course of the year, like the championship teams are not necessarily always won in football by the best teams. They're won by the healthiest teams and the teams that continue to get better throughout the year. So one of the things that I did to help that was like kind of a unique approach was just that the fact that we would change our practice schedule throughout the course of the year. So you basically, if you to put it in NBA terms, when those guys like win fast in a series and then the rest versus rust kind of scenario, week 17 and 18 in the NFL, like what do you do as far as like getting those guys ready? So I think coaches, there is no one formula that fits as far as like what your team needs, because it's different if you have a veteran team versus a younger team. But one thing I did, I tried to game plan, quote unquote game plan, or add new plays almost never. I just don't, the odds that you're putting in something brand new that you can't execute in your sleep, in my opinion, is very rare. Once in a while, you can find a complementary or supplementary thing. But other than that, you try to have a lot of carryover from week to week. So I would really start to keep kind of the same plan. Like if you had like a 3-day schedule, right? You got your, practice 1, 2, and 3, and then some form of a lighter something. So what I would do on my 1, 2, and 3 was we started out about 2 hours, hour and 40, hour and 30 at the beginning of the year for those 3 practices. And they would change in October to really, really start to drop down to about an hour and a half, hour and 20, hour and 10. And they would change again in November to where we were on the field for, I think the very first practice was maybe an hour and 15 minutes, maybe, and then adjust from there. The second one was probably an hour. Maybe it might have been an hour and a half, hour and 15 and 1 hour, I think, maybe by the end of it, something like that. But the idea of it was behind is that what you're trading, I am trading physical. I want to maximize recovery for the players and get as much juice back in their legs as possible. So as a result, we weren't going to do as many schematic changes so that the skill set that they had been developing gets to carry over. So that was my personal preference as a head guy, was to, like whatever you think you're going to gain in scheme, I'd rather my guys be rested and healthy and recovered. So I'm getting as close to the best 11 players I can in the game always, and that those players are operating as close to 100% as they possibly can. I think, it's one of those things like, you just say it or whatever. Well, like my tailback, my last year as a head guy, I think he had the 4th most carries in a single season in the history of all levels of college football. He had like something like 430 rushing attempts in one season, and he was the healthiest guy on the whole team. And I think a big chunk of that was attributed to how we practice. And here's the other thing. I went 8 weeks in a row where he had a minimum of 40 rushing attempts, and he practiced every day. He never, ever, ever missed a day of practice. And so I think that to me is the biggest thing, is if you as a coach have to balance out to figure out like, okay, the kids that are playing for me in games, I have to build and manipulate a practice model throughout the week and throughout the season that allows the kids that are playing in the game to be appearing in as much and as many practices as possible. I think that's really, really, it's not the NFL where you're taking a 6-year vet and you're just plugging him in and he kind of knows it and understands it and has been doing it. That's not how it is in college and high school. So keeping that into consideration, that to me supersedes all of it. If your guys that are playing the most in games are playing the most in practice, you're doing something right.
Next, Towson head coach Pete Shinnick shares that their goal is to have the freshest and best conditioned team on the field, so they start cutting time out of practices around week 7 of the season. He identified periods in practice that can be shortened without compromising the necessary timing and mental aspects. By making practices more efficient, they save time on their feet while still accomplishing the same goals.
We always say, whether it's week 1 or week 15, we want to be the freshest and best conditioned team that's on the field. And so with that, typically around week 7 of the season, we start cutting time out of practices. And we start shortening the amount of time that we're on the field, just so that we can, we've made some championship runs, made some Final Four runs. just so that we can say, hey, guys, here we are in week 13, and just so we're on the same page, the last 5 weeks we've saved our legs, over 6 hours that we weren't on the field. So we have a plan to cut different parts of practice, cut down the time so that we're out there less, and really trying to keep us fresh through the process.
And I know a lot of coaches look to cut time at this part of the year. What's your recommendation? Where do you really look to trim those parts of practice so that you're still getting really what you need for the timing, for the mental side of it as well?
Yeah, I think it's really, each team has to figure that out themselves. What I do is I kind of watch where the lulls are in practice, and I kind of watch which periods go a little longer than they need to, or where, you start looking at, the last part of it. We're not having the same attention span. We're not getting done what we need to. Hey, if we got a 10-minute period and we were only out here 7.5, what would that look like? Okay. And so, probably weeks 3, 4, and 5, I start looking at all the periods going, okay, which ones do we need to chop some time off of? How do we get there? And we want to be fast paced in everything that we do, and so we want our practices to be efficient. And so if we don't have to have that extra minute and a half on a period, we'll take a 10-minute period down to 8.5. We'll take a 8-minute period down to 6.5. And now we've cut 3 minutes off of it, and we're still doing the exact same thing we were doing, but we're just not out there on our feet for that time. And we try to find somewhere between 12 and 18 minutes throughout the course of our Tuesday and Wednesday practice to in each day to just get them out there less.
We finished with head coach of Union High School in Oklahoma, Kirk Fridrich. He discusses their team's approach to recovery and workload management using GPS units. They track players' yardage, top speed, and other metrics to understand their workload during games and practices. This data helps them identify when players need to be pulled back and adjust drills accordingly. They highlight that even with a few GPS units, valuable insight can be gained to optimize player performance.
We're very fortunate to have a good training staff where we work through some recovery things that we have within their facility, and recovery boots and those kinds of things, and just trying to educate our kids about sleep and nutrition, with our strength coach. But we also are tracking using GPS units. We've got 40 of our kids that are in those, and so we really have just about the ones and twos at most positions. And every day our coaches get a report of how much yardage, and then we compare that to games. So by this time of the season, we know what that workload or that threshold is, obviously top speed and some of those things. But if that GPS load during a game is at a certain level, and then you look at it in practice and you try to see, where that is, and we'll kind of color code that and say, hey, this receiver, that on Monday, you really had him way up high and he's kind of in that caution area. So now for Tuesday, I've got to figure out a way to pull back on him. And so maybe some of that, like I said, is in some of the drills you do things a little bit differently, maybe not, only working at the top of the route or whatever it might be, just so that you understand where those guys are, and you can use the GPS data to do that. And you don't have to have 40. We're very fortunate to do some of that for other reasons. But even if you have 2 or 3 and some different, middle guys, whether they're linebackers or, a couple of receivers, you can kind of get a good view of what the rest of the guys are doing.
Yeah, I think you make an important point there, that this technology is affordable, and you can look at starting to add that incrementally, that it doesn't have to be all of those units. It has become very affordable too in terms of what those units cost and the cost per year. I think the biggest thing is there's so much data you can get from it. What's the starting point for you guys? How did you expand to where you're at right now in terms of the way that coaches are going to use that data so that it's not overwhelming and it doesn't, it's not that paralysis by analysis?
Yeah. So, having a guy that you kind of takes charge of that one is something. And then really just picking a couple of things. The most frustrating thing when you get started is you've got all this and you don't know what it means. So you don't know how to adjust it. And honestly, you're not going to know. I mean, a year later, we finally figure out, okay, now we have a baseline, to work off of what our Tuesday practices were for the whole year. But when we first got started, and you can look at it after about 3 or 4 weeks, the big thing that you can see out of guys is, obviously top speed is one that's really exciting for the kids, and you can motivate them in some areas of top speed. And if you look at game 2, and this guy ran 20 miles an hour, and then you look at, game 8, and he's only hitting 19, you're at risk for some soft tissue, or we haven't done a good job of getting recovered. And it's really put an emphasis on us of how can we get our guys playing so hard on Friday nights. And the other thing you can look at is in different companies have different things, but what I call their hustle score, their GPS load, and that's just their activity at what speed, for what duration of time. And so that GPS load may be really high on a kid on the days you're practicing kickoff. If you're working on kickoff coverage and you're pairing that with something else that's high volume, offensively in the play selections, that kid's GPS load is going to be really high. So can we move kickoff team to another time, or can we work, some, like I said, maybe some short yardage where the volume of the yardage is not as high on the days you do kickoff. Those are just a couple of things that we've been able to adjust using that.
As we hit the late season weeks, finding a balance between practice intensity and player well-being to ensure that our teams remain fresh and conditioned throughout the season is important. As Coach Drinkall pointed out, the healthiest teams have the best chance at becoming champions. Continue tuning in to Coaching Coordinator of the Season for timely ideas, tips, and advice all season long. Go to coachingcoordinator.com to sign up for our weekly tip sheet, which will run down our top episodes and ideas from the week.